Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 6 of the anime series, Onihei. It's amazing and uncanny just how quickly this series ends up endearing characters to me that were only just newly debuted to, much as was the case with Zen Paci in this episode. As soon as we meet this old guy, he's like lovable, and he's quirky, and he's kooky, the faces he makes and everything like that, he's immediately endearing. And he runs into Hazels, who is traveling at the moment with, of all characters, Chugo in tow. And it's hilarious how quickly Chugo forgot his obsession with Omatsu in the last episode, because he's looking at all the women of this new town they're passing through, and he's like, wow, the local women, they put the women of Edo to shame and everything like that. And it's breaking Hazels' last nerve. He just wants to get away from Chugo for a little while, but of course it was the mandate of Hazels' own wife that Chugo be his armed guard, protect her husband, make sure no ne'er-do-wells try to take his life or attack him, everything like that. But Hazels not having it. He's had his last nerve broken. He's like, he pulls out a couple of Rio and he's like, why don't you go and sample the local clientele and get away from me for a little while? Your curiosity, let it run wild and everything like that, and it'll be okay on my own. And without very much arm twisting, Chugo takes the bait. It's actually kind of hilarious. We see Chugo later in the episode, and Hazels notices him trying to sneak past a brothel, and this bigger woman comes and grabs him and brings him back in, and Hazels kind of laughing to himself. He's not getting any sleep tonight. The good humor of Hazels as a character, it's absolutely hilarious. In the last episode, as I said, one of the funniest moments was when Chugo wasn't getting any anymore. He couldn't sneak out to the brothels, and he becomes all peaked and sickly and thin, and Hazels just loses it, laughing his ass off. So he's gotten successfully away from Chugo for the time being, and he runs into this old man Zen Paci after having run into a couple of servants who were trying to escape from their very demeaning, very authoritarian overlord, employer, this guy Ichigoro Masuya, who is a very bad apple. This is he's got sort of the local government and politicians, law enforcement and everything in his pocket. He bribes them, they look the other way. He's completely starving out and mistreating his servant class and everything like that, with the exception of his armed guards, the thuggies that they are. And so Hazels, when he runs into these two servants, Tadoroku and Omoyo respectively, he sees them on the ground, sort of looking like they've been attacked. They're all scuffed and bruised, and they're surrounded by these thuggy-looking guys. Of course, his natural compunction would be to believe that they are being attacked or robbed or something. And so he swoops in to basically defend their lives. Soon thereafter, they have this sort of law enforcement official come up on horseback with the rest of his crew, and it turns out all these guys are part of that crew, and they're trying to take Tadoroku and Omoyo back into custody for having stolen money from their employer. That's the limit of what, Hazels is aware of at that point. After the fact, Zen Paci, he ends up sneaking up on Hazels, and I thought this was an interesting footnote when Hazels finally sort of breaks away from him, much as he did to Chugo at the start of the episode. He's kind of had enough of the talkative old man. He reflects back on the fact that when they first encountered each other, he never heard Zen Paci coming up behind him. He just suddenly appeared beside him. Very cat burglar-esque was my impression of that, and that plays very much into the character of Zen Paci, and the rest of the story for the episode. But when they do have their first encounters, and Pachi's, talking about how unfortunate it is that these two servants were taken back into custody. They'd only stolen, basically pocket change, 2 Rio, and tried to get away from this very harsh environment that they were employed and trapped within. We see hints of this later in the episode, once they've been taken back to this Ichigoro Masuya's place. One of his chief guards is trying to rape Omoyo, and all the female servants and everything. You don't have to twist their arm at all for them to try to help Hazels and Paci and these two servants escape, everything like that. Even if they cannot escape of their own accord, to be able to stick it to this very demeaning, overlording Ichigoro, they're only too happy to do that, coming to the assistance of Hazels and Paci and all that stuff. So, of course, Zen Paci, after Hazels has spirited away from him again, Hazels goes to this hot spring where he's taking a load off, he's bathing, and here is Zen Paci again, completely out of nowhere. He watches his back. He's very sort of appraising of Hazel. He's very impressed by his prowess with the sword, his build, and everything like that. And of course, you're suspecting what more is going on here. And Zen Paci basically lets the other leg drop. I'm a career criminal. I'm a cat burglar and everything like that. And there's the whole aspect of the honor among thieves, Robin Hood-esque, aspect of his nature that immediately, as I talked about before, always immediately appeals to me and sort of gets my imagination going and compels me. Because here is a guy, he doesn't, steal from the poor. He doesn't abuse people who are already abused. He's going after the kinds of people, the very wealthy, overlording types this Ichigoro Masuya is, and taking from them for his own benefit, but also for the benefit of others. And there is some level of Heizo challenging just how selfless Zen Paci will be, because Heizo, it's almost like taking a 180-degree turn from his nature to once finding out Zen Paci wants to steal some of Ichigoro's money. Heizo just kind of goes along with it. He believes very much what this old man is telling him, but then, of course, the next morning he sees it anyway with his own eyes. He sees this Ichigoro bribing this law enforcement official that he ran into previously, taking Tadoroko and Omoyo back into custody. So he sees it for himself. He knows the old man is being truthful, and he ends up agreeing with the old man. We're going to hit this Ichigoro's place. We're going to steal some of his, money that he has probably unlawfully accrued and everything like that. And that challenge comes when they've finally done so, like Zen Paci has snuck in. He's pretended to be a customer, and, in the middle of the night, he's going to open a door for Heizo, who's all decked out in like ninja attire. They're going to go into the vault. They're going to steal some money. And when they're doing this, after, I might add, Zen Paci having a squat, taking a dump in the middle of this guy's like bank, shed on his property, because he feels like, it's about the honor thing. I'm going to disgrace this guy's monetary balance by taking a dump on it, leaving a wad behind. Heizo basically says to him, well, we came this far. What do you think about saving those two servants, doing something good for them and for the greater good on a more personal level? And at first Zen Paci, he acts like it never occurred to him, but he's already sympathetic because he was the one who brought up their plight to begin with to Heizo when they first encountered each other. And so Zen Paci's like, well, you know what? We could actually use some more hands if we're going to take some of this money and everything like that. And of course, they end up doing so. They end up saving Tadoroku and Omoyo. Omoyo is about to be raped, as I say, by one of the chief guards of this Ichigoro, and they're making Tadoroku watch. Presumably these two are lovers who are trying to steal away with each other in the middle of the night, make a better life for themselves, actually have some kind of hopeful life, out from under the thumb of this overlord that Ichigoro is. And of course, Heizo comes in, knocks out the guards, and all four of them have now gone back to grab the money and sneak out. Now, it really got tense because you weren't quite sure how they were going to manage to get, four people out of this compound with money in tow and everything like that. The old man is dealing with some kind of anxiety, some kind of health problem. He believes he's dying. And they're successful just by the skin of their teeth getting Tadoroku and Omoyo out. Of course, Zen Paci ends up dropping this sort of book that he has built up over the years of all of his criminalistic ventures. Everything in his entire history is cataloged in this book. And so it's very important to him, and he goes back for it. And he comes under the attack of one of these guards, and you think this old guy's dead. Zen Paci's dead. Heizo, of course, has doubled back to save his life. And because of whatever illness he feels impacted by, Heizo has to then carry him. But because Zen Paci has like cat-like eyes, he can see in the dark. Heizo's carrying him a la, Luke carrying Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. And he's like, I'll be your legs, you be my eyes, and we'll get out of here. And they succeed. They manage to get the best of this Ichigoro guy and get some of his money. They meet up with Tadoroku and Omoyo in the woods thereafter. It's like the next morning, and they have given them a nice stipend to create a new life for themselves, very selflessly. And it's so impactful and emotional and satisfying to see that. And of course, once they've run off and, Zen Paci kind of looks back at Hazel and he's like, what? He's like, feels good, doesn't it? He's like, oh, shut up. So, I mean, it's immediately endearing. And that's where, of course, we have what follows on from that point is Zen Paci spilling the beans as to what this book is, why it means so much to him, what his purpose of seeking Hazel out was. And Hazel apparently, he I don't know if I would say reluctantly, decides to take this book, but of course they come under the attack of this law enforcement official again, who's tracked them and found Zen Paci, and he's going to take Zen Paci into custody. And here we see probably the most standout moment of the episode. Hazel gets up, he unsheaths his sword, and he's like, well, maybe it's about time I took out some law enforcement people, some government officials for a change, rather than the criminal element, because these people are criminals, or at least they're being led by one. Somebody willing to take bribes and look the other way when this criminalistic overlord Ichigoro Masuya bribes him and everything like that. And it just, in that moment, I was like, whoa, is Hazel actually going to do this? And then at the last second, Chugo comes in and he's like, "What are you, nuts? This is Hazel Hasegawa. You're not gonna fight this guy. He's one of the big bads." Even Zen Paci knew, the reason he doesn't go to Edo and enact his criminalistic ventures is because he knows of the Onihei. He knows of Hazel Hasegawa. He doesn't know this is Hazel. Hazel gave him the fake name, using, of course, Chugo's last name as part of his, Hazel Kimura or whatever, but. And this guy is absolutely astounded. Zen Paci almost has a heart attack right then and there when he realizes this is the Onihei. Holy crap, It's just hilarious. And so what follows is Hazel gives Zen Paci sort of looking over by one of his doctors or something. Someone, he pulls in a request that he looks over Zen Paci. And it turns out all of the lifestyle, all of the worry, it's, made Zen Paci sick. He's not, in fact, dying. He's just driven himself to worry so much, whether it's an ulcer or whether it's anxiety, all these pains that he's having. It's stress from the job and everything like that. Maybe you better dial it back a little. Rather than thinking like he does that he has 6 months left to live, this doctor's like, you're going to be good for another 10 years at least, everything. And so I loved how everything came to fruition. Everything came to a beautiful end. They were able to get at the heart of this Ichigoro Masuya guy by stealing some of his ill-gotten gains. And they were able to give Todoroki and Omoyo some money to start a brand new life of their own. They saved their lives in many senses of that term and let them go off and have a prosperous future potentially. Zen Paci, maybe he didn't find someone to actually take up the mantle in Hazel, but his time spent with him was for the greater good as well. Just that character interaction, and brought a bigger awareness to Hazel as well. Everyone benefited from what happened, what transpired in the episode. And I myself, as the viewer, enjoyed the ever-loving hell out of it as well. So it was, 2 thumbs up all the way around. And great episode, great story. Once again, love this series and its capability, its uncanny nature of endearing these characters to me in just a small amount of time that we get to spend with them. We didn't even spend hardly any time with Todoroki and Omoyo, but because of their plight, because of what we're told about it, you're rooting for them. You want them to win. You want them to get away from the harsh reality, even without having to have seen it, but we do see it. We see that, Omoyo is about to be raped. We know this is the wrong life for them to be leading, and we want something better for them. And Hazel, working in tandem with Zen Paci, even though it might not be befitting of his natural sort of occupation, it's still an extension of his doing good and enforcing laws and taking down the criminal element. And he leaves that law enforcement official with the promise, if I run into you again, forget it. So he kind of says the same to Zen Paci in the end as well. But it's more tongue-in-cheek that. I could very easily see Zen Paci becoming a part of Hazel's, employ, much as we've seen him reform some of the other criminals and everything in, previous episodes, Kumahachi and everything like that. That would be awesome. That would be spectacular. And that's what this episode was. Absolutely spectacular. So, yeah. Otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well. And I'll catch you all later. Peace.